Another common test smell is what we call the test run war, which means if I myself, a developer, run the tests, they pass. But if any of my colleagues also run the tests at the same time, the tests then fail. This doesn't make sense because you create some sort of lock in your development environment, as just one person can run the tests at a time. There are many reasons that may cause a test run war. One of them can be that tests, even in separate machines, are using or manipulating the same data. So whenever a second execution happens, both executions then clash with each other and tests start to fail. This can very much happen if your tests deal with databases. Can you think of a concrete example that can illustrate the test run war smell? The other very common smell is what we call general fixture. In many situations, instead of having small fixtures in each test, and by fixture I mean the arrange part of the test, the developer writes a very large fixture, which is then used by all the test methods. But what we then see in practice is that test 1 uses part of the fixture, test 2 uses another part of the fixture, so all the tests use just a small part, but never the entire fixture, of course. And the problem with this is that this is very hard for developers to understand. They never know what data is important for that test in specific. A large fixture requires lots of cognitive effort to be understood. How to mitigate this smell? Make sure that your tests contain clear and concise fixtures, and never more than what's really needed. We are going to actually see one design pattern called Test Data Builder that helps developers to avoid the general fixture code smell. Another common smell is what we call indirect tests. This smell is about a test class that instead of only focusing on the class it needs to test, it indirectly tests the behavior of other classes. And the problem here is that as soon as a bug is introduced in a class, you suddenly have lots of test classes failing with failing tests. And having many failing tests for a single reason is cumbersome and consumes lots of time from developers. So make sure your tests are focused and that they do not indirectly test other classes. And finally, the smell that we call sensitive equality, which is you're now doing the assertions that you want to make sure that the behavior worked as expected, but the assertions are so specific and so sensitive to small changes that any change in the production code breaks the tests. And this is not the kind of test you want. You want your tests to be resilient as much as possible. So make sure that when you're writing assertions, your assertions are stable. If you change something in production class, this doesn't need to impact your assertions. This was just a quick summary of everything that is in the fantastic XUnit test patterns book. I do recommend you to read the entire book from front to cover.